You know those moments, don't you? Those moments when the weight of the world settles squarely on your shoulders, and for a fleeting, terrifying second, you wonder if you can even take another breath. The kind of moments where the vibrant colors of life seem to drain away, leaving only shades of gray. For Elias, that moment wasn't just fleeting. It was a constant, suffocating companion. He was an artist, you see, but the city wasn't interested in his art. It was interested in rent checks, utility bills, and the cold, hard reality of survival. He stood by the window of his cramped, one-room apartment, the kind of place where the dreams you brought with you slowly start to gather dust alongside forgotten canvases. Outside New York City, a behemoth of ambition and indifference roared on. Lights twinkled like mocking stars, each one representing a life thriving, a dream realized, while his felt like it was flickering, about to go out. The eviction notice sat on his worn wooden table, a stark white testament to his failure. 3 days. 3 days until the lock changed, until his few belongings, his precious paints and brushes, were out on the curb. He tried everything, sold almost everything, eaten ramen for weeks, but the art, his very soul, remained stubbornly unsold. He felt invisible, utterly, completely, devastatingly invisible. It was a Tuesday he would never forget. Not because of the eviction, not because of the crushing despair, but because of a single tiny, almost insignificant act. An act that he thought no one saw, an act that he barely even remembered doing. But that one unseen moment, that one whisper of kindness in a world that felt so loud and uncaring, was about to set in motion a chain of events so profound, so miraculous, that it would not only save his life, but redefine his very understanding of humanity. You won't believe how one small, forgotten gesture can echo through a lifetime. Stay with us, because this is a story about the unseen magic that lives in the quiet corners of our world. Elias had arrived in the city 3 years ago, his heart brimming with the kind of naive optimism only a true artist can possess. He envisioned grand galleries, bustling studios, and the vibrant hum of creative energy. Instead, he found crushing competition, astronomical rents, and a soul-crushing silence from the art world. His days were a monotonous cycle. Wake up, stare at a half-finished canvas, force himself to paint even when the inspiration felt like a distant memory, then head out to his part-time barista job, barely making enough to scrape by. Nights were spent hunched over cheap instant noodles, sketching furiously in his worn notebook, trying to capture the elusive beauty he still believed existed somewhere in the urban sprawl. He remembered the early days vividly, the excitement of mixing colors, the thrill of a new idea taking shape. Now, each brushstroke felt like a chore, each blank canvas a mocking reminder of his dwindling funds and disappearing hope. He'd poured every last ounce of his savings, every spare moment, into his passion. His parents, back in a small, quiet town, had subtly urged him to pursue something more stable, but he'd brushed off their concerns with the fierce determination of youth. Now, shame began to creep in, a cold hand squeezing his chest. How could he go back? How could he face them, admit defeat? The eviction notice had been the final, brutal blow. His landlord, a stern woman with eyes that seemed to have seen every hardship the city could offer, had been polite but firm. "Business is business, Mr. Vance. I'm sorry." Sorry, a word that felt empty and hollow in the face of his desperation. He had called every gallery he'd ever submitted to, every contact he'd ever made. The answers were always the same. "We'll keep your work on file," or "not quite what we're looking for right now," or, most often, no answer at all. His last decent painting, a cityscape bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun, sat propped against the wall. It was vibrant, full of life, everything he no longer felt. He considered taking it down to the pawn shop, but the thought felt like tearing a piece of his own flesh. It was his last shred of identity as an artist. That Tuesday morning, the air was crisp, lighting with the promise of winter. Elias had just returned from another fruitless trip to a gallery, his spirits lower than ever. The barista shift had been brutal, too, a rush-hour frenzy that left him exhausted and smelling faintly of burnt coffee. He felt a dull ached behind. His eyes, a constant companion these days. He knew he should be doing something, anything, to secure his future. But the energy, the will, it was gone. He decided to walk. Just walk. To clear his head, or perhaps to let the city swallow him. Whole. He wandered aimlessly through the familiar streets, past towering skyscrapers that seemed to mock his smallness, past bustling cafes filled with laughter he couldn't join, past designer boutiques where people spent more on a single item than he made in a month. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his gaze fixed on the cracked pavement beneath his worn sneakers. He felt utterly disconnected, a ghost moving through a world teeming with life. As he turned the corner onto a quieter, tree-lined street, a rare oasis in the urban jungle, something caught his eye. An old woman, her back slightly hunched, was struggling. Her grocery bag, thin plastic overloaded with what looked like fresh produce, had just burst. Oranges, apples, a carton of milk, and a scattering of canned goods had cascaded across the cold sidewalk, rolling in every direction. She let out a small, distressed gasp, her frail hands trembling as she bent, slowly, painfully, to retrieve a rolling orange. Most people walked past. They hurried by, lost in their own worlds, their own schedules. Elias saw a young man in a sharp suit glance, then quickly look away, pulling out his phone. A woman pushing a stroller navigated around the scattered groceries without a word. The city's indifference was palpable, almost a character in itself. But Elias stopped. He didn't think about his eviction notice, his empty stomach, or his failing dreams. He just stopped. It was an instinct, a flicker of humanity that hadn't been completely extinguished by his despair. Without a second thought, he knelt down. His fingers, usually nimble with a paintbrush, moved quickly. He scooped up the oranges, then the apples, carefully placing them near her feet. He grabbed the milk carton before it could roll into the street. The old woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise, then filled with a warmth that felt like sunshine on a winter day. Her face, lined with age, broke into a grateful smile. "Oh, thank you, young man," she whispered, her voice raspy but kind. "You didn't have to." Elias just offered a small, tired smile in return. "No problem at all," he mumbled, his voice a bit rough from disuse. He then noticed the torn grocery bag. He looked around. No shops nearby that would give her a new one. He didn't have a spare bag either. Then, another impulse. Without thinking, he unzipped his worn backpack, pulled out a thick, empty portfolio, one he rarely used anymore, meant for carrying larger canvases, and carefully transferred her remaining groceries into it. It wasn't ideal, but it was sturdy. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "This should hold them." The woman's eyes welled up slightly. "My goodness," she said, her voice trembling. "You're too kind. What's your name, dear?" Elias hesitated. He felt a strange pang. He didn't want any acknowledgement. He didn't want to explain his situation or deal with pity. He just wanted to disappear back into the anonymity of the city. It's fine," he said, quickly standing up. "Just glad to help." He offered another quick, almost imperceptible nod, and then, before she could say another word, he turned and walked away, blending back into the stream of pedestrians. He didn't look back. He didn't see her still standing there, watching him. Disappear, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. He didn't see her reach into her coat pocket, pulling out a small, elegant phone. He simply walked, the small act of kindness, a fleeting warmth that momentarily pushed back the cold despair. He felt nothing more than a faint sense of having done something small, something ordinary. He forgot about it almost immediately. Days bled into weeks. The eviction threat loomed closer, then became a harsh reality. Elias had managed to find a temporary, even smaller room in a dilapidated boarding house on the edge of the city, a place that smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten dreams. He'd packed his few belongings, including his last precious painting, into boxes. The barista job was barely enough to cover the new, cheaper rent and sparse meals. He still painted, of course. It was an addiction, a compulsion. But the joy had left it, replaced by a desperate longing for recognition, for a sign that his art mattered. He sent out more emails, submitted more online portfolios. Crickets. The silence was deafening. He started to believe the city had truly swallowed him whole. His canvases, once bursting with color, now seemed dull, lifeless. He felt himself shrinking, becoming even more invisible than before. Then something shifted. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. One morning, he received an email. It was from a small, independent gallery he'd submitted to months ago, one he'd completely forgotten about. The subject line read, regarding your submission, the golden cityscape. Elias's heart gave a tiny, hopeful flutter, quickly followed by a familiar cynical shrug. It would be another rejection, he was sure. He opened it, bracing himself for the polite, not what we're looking for. But it wasn't. The email was from a Ms. Evelyn Reed, the gallery owner. She wrote, Dear Mr. Vance, I apologize for the delayed response. I recently came across your piece, The Golden Cityscape, in our archive submissions, and I must say, I was profoundly moved by it. There's a depth, a raw emotion in your brushwork that truly stands out. I'd be very interested in featuring it in our upcoming Urban Perspectives exhibition next month. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss details. Elias read it once, then twice, then a third time, his eyes scanning each word, searching for a catch. Archived submissions? He'd sent that painting in 6 months ago. Why? Now? Why suddenly? It felt random, too random to be true. He typed out a shaky reply, trying to sound professional despite his pounding heart. The meeting with Evelyn Reed was surreal. She was a poised, elegant woman in her late 60s, with kind, knowing eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She spoke passionately about his work, about the way he captured light and shadow, the soul of the city. She offered him a small space in her gallery, a chance for his golden cityscape to be seen. It wasn't a major gallery, not the one he dreamed of, but it was a start, a real start. He walked out of her gallery that day, feeling a flicker of the old optimism, a spark of hope he thought had long died, but the shifts continued. A week later, he received an unexpected notification from a local community art center. They were offering a small grant for struggling artists to use their studio space for 3 months, rent-free, supplies included. He'd never even heard of the grant before, yet his application, which he hadn't even consciously remembered submitting, had been accepted. It was an anonymous grant, facilitated by a generous benefactor. It felt like a miracle. He had a place to paint, a proper studio, for the first time in his life. The mildewy boarding house room suddenly seemed a distant memory. His work, fueled by this new sense of possibility, began to flourish. The golden cityscape sold on the opening night of the exhibition. Not for a fortune, but for enough to pay off some old debts and buy proper art supplies. The buyer, a quiet, unassuming man, simply said, "This piece, it reminds me of the hidden beauty you find when you truly look." Elias felt a surge of pride, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He started painting with renewed vigor, the colors on his palette seeming brighter, bolder. He experimented with new techniques, his canvases filled with the energy he now felt bubbling within him. He started getting more commissions, small at first, then larger. His name, Elias Vance, was beginning to be whispered in certain art circles. It was slow, steady progress, but it was progress nonetheless. He often wondered about Evelyn Reed. Why had she suddenly decided to look through archived submissions? Why his painting after so long? And the anonymous grant? It all felt too convenient, too perfectly timed. He dismissed it as luck, a sudden turn of the tide. But a tiny, nagging voice in the back of his mind wondered if there was something more dotted. It was almost a year later. Elias was no longer struggling. He had his own small studio apartment, not grand, but bathed in natural light. His art was gaining recognition, and he was finally making a living doing what he loved. He was preparing for his first solo exhibition at Evelyn Reed's gallery, a culmination of his dreams. The opening night was a whirlwind. People milled about, admiring his work, sipping wine, and discussing art. Elias, dressed in his best, and only clean suit, felt a surge of surreal happiness. He spotted Evelyn across the room, talking animatedly with a group of people. He decided to go thank her again, to tell her how much her belief in him had meant. As he approached, he overheard a fragment of her conversation. She was talking about his golden cityscape. "Yes," Evelyn was saying, her voice clear and resonant. "Elias's golden cityscape truly captures the essence of finding beauty in unexpected places. You know, it was quite serendipitous how I came across it." She paused, a small, thoughtful smile on her face. "My grandmother, bless her heart, is quite the enthusiast for new talent. She's been subtly nudging me to look at more independent artists. And well, she actually saw Elias's spirit, you could say. She saw a young man helping her pick up groceries one day, and she was so struck by his genuine kindness, his silent compassion in a bustling city. She said, 'Evelyn, if a soul like that is creating art, it must be something special. Find him.' And she even remembered his backpack, the old art portfolio he put her groceries into. That detail led me to track him down through a very small, obscure online art forum he'd briefly listed it on." Elias froze. His blood ran cold, then warm, then cascaded through him in a wave of shock and realization. The old woman, the grocery bag, the portfolio, the Tuesday. He remembered it all, now in vivid, astonishing detail. The moment he'd completely forgotten, the act he thought no one saw. Evelyn's grandmother. His gaze locked onto Evelyn. She caught his eye, that knowing smile on her face. She excused herself from her group and walked towards him. "Elias," she said softly, her eyes twinkling. "You look as if you've seen a ghost." He could only stammer. The old woman. "Your grandmother?" Evelyn chuckled, a warm, melodic sound. "Indeed. My grandmother, Clara Vance, a remarkable woman with an uncanny ability to spot true character and often true talent. Clara Vance. The same last name as him? A distant relative? No, it couldn't be. Just a coincidence. She always says," Evelyn continued, "that the truest kindness is often unseen. It's done without expectation of reward, without an audience. And when she saw your silent compassion that day, she knew you had a heart worth supporting. It wasn't just your art she believed in, Elias. It was your spirit." Elias stood there, speechless. The pieces clicked into place. The random email, the anonymous grant, the sudden interest in his archived work. It wasn't luck. It was the ripple effect. The direct result of that one fleeting, forgotten moment on a cold sidewalk. His single unseen act of kindness had, indeed, changed everything. He felt a rush of emotions, humility, gratitude, overwhelming awe. All this time he'd felt invisible, yet he had been seen. Seen not for his art, but for the purest part of himself. And that quiet recognition had been the catalyst for his entire turnaround. He had been so focused on his own despair, his own struggles, that he hadn't realized a tiny seed of kindness he'd planted had blossomed into a lifeline. He found Clara at the exhibition later that night. She was seated elegantly, admiring one of his new pieces. He knelt beside her, tears welling in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me." Clara smiled, her hand gently touching his arm. "My dear boy," she said, her eyes warm and bright. "Kindness is never unseen. Not by the universe, and certainly not by a grateful heart. You simply paid attention to a need, and that, Elias, is the greatest art of all." Elias's life was transformed, not just by success, but by the profound realization that kindness, no matter how small or unnoticed, creates ripples far beyond our perception. He continued to paint, but his art took on a new depth, a new purpose. He started depicting scenes of connection, of empathy, of hidden moments of grace in the city. His golden cityscape now seemed to glow with a deeper meaning. He never forgot the boarding house, or the ramen, or the feeling of invisibility. It kept him grounded. He started volunteering at local community art programs, secretly funding small grants for young, struggling artists, just as Clara had done for him. He became a quiet benefactor, an unseen helper, mirroring the very act that had saved him. His story became a testament to the idea that sometimes the most powerful acts aren't the ones proclaimed from rooftops, but the ones whispered in quiet corners, seen by no one but the universe itself. It taught him that giving doesn't deplete you. It enriches you in ways you can't imagine. It showed him that hope can emerge from the most unexpected places, carried by the most unexpected hands. The city, once a symbol of his despair, now felt different. He still saw the indifference, the rush, the struggle. But now he also saw the small, almost imperceptible acts of humanity happening everywhere. A hand held, a door opened, a shared smile. He knew, intimately, that those were the real threads holding the tapestry of human connection together. And he understood that sometimes, just sometimes, being seen isn't about being noticed, but about truly being understood and having your inherent goodness recognized. His art became a bridge, connecting people to the raw, beautiful emotions of life. He never sought fame for his story, choosing instead to let his actions speak for themselves, much like the unseen act that had changed everything for him. He lived a life now filled with purpose, driven by a quiet gratitude for the woman who saw him, not when he was a celebrated artist, but when he was just a struggling soul extending a hand. And in doing so, he became the kind of person who could extend a hand to others, truly understanding the unseen needs of the heart. This is a reminder that the world is filled with everyday heroes, with quiet acts of compassion that often go unacknowledged, yet hold immense power. The smallest kindness can create the biggest ripple. It can save a dream, mend a spirit, or even change an entire life, long after the moment has passed and been forgotten by the giver. So, the next time you see someone struggling or have an impulse to help, remember Elias. Remember Clara. And remember that the most beautiful acts are often the ones no one sees except the heart that receives them, and the universe that weaves them into destiny. If Elias's story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of hope, or reminded you of an unseen kindness you've experienced or witnessed, please take a moment to like this video. Your likes help us share these powerful stories with more people who need to hear them about. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Heartfelt Chronicles. We bring you true stories of compassion, resilience, and the incredible human spirit every week. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another journey with us. What's an unseen act of kindness that has changed your life or someone you know? Share your story in the comments below. Let's spread more of this positivity. Not thank you for watching, and remember, your smallest act of kindness might just be the one that changes everything for someone else. See you in the next chronicle.